Shalom, back with part two, news and prophecy, wars and rumors of wars. Let's get back to the video.
In Lithuania, in Vilnius, and no one would speak to Zelensky. Zelensky was essentially given the cold shoulder because they viewed him as the individual who'd lied to them about his ability to be successful and defeat the Russians. And in truth, they'd all been lying to themselves from day one. And we, of course, have helped this along by promising the world and delivering nothing. I think the best way to look at it is we promised mountains and delivered a molehill. So the NATO itself is in disarray. All you have to do is look at this man, Macron. Imagine Washington is the leader of NATO. And Macron...
You heard what he said? Washington is the leader of NATO. See, America, is the whore that reigneth over the kings of the earth, okay? Known as that great city. You read that in Revelation 17 and 18, okay? All right, let's get back.
Macron steps onto the stage and tells everyone France will fight the Russians in Ukraine, effectively, which, of course, is absurd. He hasn't got more than 7,700 ready French troops that he can send anywhere in the world, let alone Ukraine. He promises 20,000. He's trying to build that up, but it's not likely to get very far. And then he's backed down from those initial statements saying, well, they'll be in a non-combat role. So NATO itself is in disarray. The Germans have disavowed him and said, no, forget it. We will not participate on the ground in Ukraine under any circumstances. And of course, our newest members, the Finns and the Swedes, are falling all over themselves to send thousands of troops to fight in Russia, aren't they? Answer is no. No one is. Macron is entirely alone, and our forces are sitting in Poland and Romania doing whatever they do while expensive bases are erected there for U.S. comfort. This is a disaster for NATO. So understand everything that's happening right now against those two facts. Zelensky is finished. His regime is dying. NATO is in disarray, has no leadership, and is afraid to admit the obvious that everyone knows privately the war is completely lost. So those two things have to be understood. Now, let's look at the event that occurred itself in Russia. Out of the blue, we have people who are ostensibly Central Asian Muslims, Turkic Muslims. We know of one that was a Tajik. It may be that they're all Tajiks. The Tajiks are people that live north of Afghanistan. They're unique in Central Asia because they speak a brand of Farsi or Persian, which is kind of unusual. Everyone else speaks what we call Turkic, almost the same thing you hear in Istanbul. So that's kind of interesting. We know that the Ukrainians have recruited many of these people to fight inside the Ukrainian army. We have evidence that some of these people have been part of the Ukrainian army. Out of the blue, these people go into Russia, which sounds impossible, but you have to understand the 1,000+ miles of border that you cannot possibly protect effectively if you're a Russian right now. So these people get into Russia. They go to an arms cache, which is being prepared for them somewhere. They've obviously had some training. They show up and murder people in Moscow. And then miraculously, they attempt to retreat along exactly the same route they took to get in there from Ukraine. What are we seeing? We're seeing rank amateurism. These people are not professionals. They're thugs who were offered a lot of money to go in and do this. They talked themselves into it. They went in. Most of them are dead or captured. I don't know if anybody got back into Ukraine. But the last thing you do if you're a professional is take the same route out that you took in on the mission. Now, the man that was captured has got most of the attention is, of course, the gentleman who's lost his ear at this point. The Spetsnaz unit that captured him and his friends work for General Kadyrov. They are Chechens. And so they sliced off this man's ear at some point. Whether or not it was already partially injured and they decided to tear it off, who knows? The Russians, of course, were not pleased with this and immediately said, what are you doing to these people? Do not mistreat them, et cetera, et cetera. So then the question was asked, who among you sliced off this man's ear? And the group collectively all stood there and said, I did. In other words, they wouldn't give up the individual. Right. Now, all of this has worked to Putin's advantage in a dramatic way. The Russian people are infuriated. They're angry. They want blood. The emotions in Russia are running very, very high. And there are people in the Duma who are telling Putin publicly and privately, you need to crush Ukraine. You need to end this once and for all. And if anybody gets in your way from the West, the hell with it. We'll just march in there too. Putin is not an emotional actor. He's very rational. He's very thoughtful. He's very deliberate. He's not going to be rushed into this thing. But clearly, once the ground dries out in Ukraine, and that's going to happen towards the end of April, latest beginning of May, I think you're going to see major movements to include crossing the Dnieper River and moving south to take Odessa, and probably movements up north to complete the conquest of Kharkov and perhaps run right up to the river in immediate proximity to Kiev. I wouldn't be surprised, because the pressure is now on to end this thing. We have offered nothing. We refuse to negotiate. We treat the Russians as though they're responsible for this disaster, when in fact we ourselves have brought this on ourselves. You know, this is a hell of our own making. No one wants to take credit for it. I am glad that people on the Hill are now questioning the wisdom of sending any more money over there, because we don't even have any idea how many billions of dollars have simply been stolen and ended up in bank accounts. Remember, Ukraine continues to wallow in the worst sort of corruption. They make Mexico look like an advanced economy. That's how bad it is. So this thing is nearing its end, its final moment. No one is going to take Putin on. We're not going to go to war in Ukraine over this. This is just not going to happen. But we're going to continue to talk. The media is going to continue to lie, with the exception of people like you and Tucker and a few others, and say that Ukraine is winning and the Russians are running out of steam. It's all nonsense. This thing is almost over.
All right. We'll be right back with parts 3 and 4. So long.